Now we're going to talk about my personal favorite ontologist. Doesn't have to be your favorite, I'm just letting you know that I do have my own biases. And that's the differentiated relational ontology. The differentiated relational ontology. Those of you who are familiar with philosophy will be very familiar with the differentiated relational ontology. Because quite frankly, it is Plato's theory of forms. It is Alfred White Northhead's process ontology. Mary Parker Follett is a great example of the differentiated relational ontology in action. Those of you who do not know Mary Parker Follett, I encourage you to watch some of my other videos on my channel about Mary Parker Follett. She's the mother of modern management. She's just the best. Again, I'm very biased, but I just think she's great. So, the differentiated relational ontology. Let me draw it out and then show you kind of how it works. So, you've got every single individual here is a big O and a little o at the same time. And every single big O and little o connects to somebody else who is a big O and a little o at the same time too. So there's a degree of relationality. So let's talk about what this means. I always like to use a discussion about belief in God for this ontology because I think it's the clearest. So there may be some sort of a God out there which we attempt to understand. Okay? That's the big O. Now, as we are attempting to understand that big O, that God, we have some sort of an understanding, and we become partially divine in our attempts to understand that big God, right? So through kind of cognitively, or through our thoughts, we partially become divine. However, we're not God. We are also people at the same time. So we can think to the heavens, but yet we live on earth. Okay. Now, all by ourselves, we have our own understanding of God, again, and it's based on the divine and then through the individual. And when we talk to other people about our belief in God, like maybe you go to church, you talk to a minister or a pastor or a priest, you hopefully have some sort of a better understanding of God than you did before because of the fact that you discussed it. Let me give maybe a corporate example. Think about you're in a meeting and the boss says, I want things done in X, Y, and Z way. Well, that's the big O because that's the real statement, what the boss said. Okay? You hear it and then you interpret it in a certain way. Then you go to the water cooler with your 3 colleagues and you're saying, well, you remember when the boss said he wanted done this, this, and this is how I'm doing it. And your colleagues look at you and say, well, that's not quite what the boss said. Actually, the boss said A, B, and C, not X, Y, and Z. And so therefore I think you're a little wrong. And you say, oh my goodness, you're right. So let me kind of meld your interpretations of what the boss said along with the ones that I have, and hopefully together through our discussion we have a product that better matches the boss's intent versus what I could come up with all by myself. Let's give a couple of theories that go along with this. Social anarchism. Social anarchism basically says, you know, we are anarchists, we reject kind of an outside authority, yet we are kind of our own embodied thing all by ourselves. So we have kind of this big O, this set of values that is maybe different from the collective set of values that are generally embraced by society. So we have these other set of values, and we interpret them in a unique way, and we kind of, through our discussion with others, we share this interpretation. You also have humanism. And by the way, social anarchism doesn't necessarily mean, I'm not talking about the Petrograd Soviet, necessarily the Paris Commune, which I'll talk about in business history. But you could also look at, Google, which has a unique organizational culture, right? So they have their unique organizational culture, that big O, and then every single employee of Google has a specific interpretation of Google's overall culture. And then together, by working in that kind of environment, they reinforce each other's understanding of culture, of that Google culture, and so they all kind of start to think alike. That's also an example of social anarchy. Humanism. Humanism, of course, comes out of the Enlightenment and says, you know what? Because of the fact that we can think, there's a little bit of God in all of us. We're still human beings, of course, and we can kind of explore our relationship with the divine through kind of talking together, through bonds of society. And then, of course, you have pantheism. And pantheism, again, says we are all part of God. The difference is, it's not that we all can think and therefore there's a little bit of God in us, but literally we are all gods in our own sort of way, and we can kind of understand our own divinity through discussions. The main difference between the differentiated relational ontology and the other ontologies is the differentiated relational ontology emphasizes change. The more you talk to people, the better you understand things, and the more your understandings are actually changing. Well, I hope that you have enjoyed this discussion of ontology, and I am looking forward to seeing you in our next set of modules.